Most tragic heroes fall because they do not understand what is happening to them. They misread a prophecy, trust the wrong person, or discover the truth only when it is too late. Ignorance drives the catastrophe, but Jean Racine's Phèdre, first performed in 1677, presents a far more unsettling possibility. In Racine's tragedy, the characters are not destroyed because they misunderstand their situation. They are destroyed because they understand it perfectly. The story itself was already ancient by Racine's time. The myth had been dramatized by Euripides in the 5th century BCE in his play Hippolytus, and later by the Roman philosopher Seneca in a tragedy titled Phaedra. The outline of the narrative was familiar. Phaedra, the wife of the Athenian king Theseus, develops an illicit passion for her stepson Hippolytus. When the truth emerges, the consequences are catastrophic: accusations, divine punishment, and death. Racine inherited this myth along with the entire tradition of classical tragedy that surrounded it. What makes Racine's version extraordinary is not the plot. The sequence of events was well known to his audience. What Racine transformed was the location of the tragedy itself. In earlier versions of the myth, the disaster is largely driven by forces outside the characters. Euripides frames the story through divine conflict. The goddess Aphrodite punishes Hippolytus for his devotion to Artemis by inspiring Phaedra with destructive desire. The tragedy unfolds because the gods intervene in human life. Seneca's version, written centuries later in Rome, amplifies the violence and emotional excess of the story. His play is filled with grand speeches, extreme imagery, and moments of theatrical spectacle. Racine moves the drama somewhere else entirely. The catastrophe unfolds primarily inside the minds of the characters. Instead of divine manipulation or rhetorical extravagance, Racine concentrates on moral consciousness, on the terrifying experience of seeing clearly what one ought not to feel, and yet feeling it anyway. The tragedy of Phèdre is not ignorance, but awareness. From the moment Phaedra confesses her passion, she understands it as both shameful and destructive. One of the most famous lines in French drama captures the moment she first saw Hippolytus. Je le vis, je rougis, je pâlis à sa vue. I saw him, I blushed, I turned pale at his sight. The line is striking for its simplicity. There is no elaborate metaphor, no ornate description. The experience of overwhelming desire is presented almost as a sequence of physical symptoms: seeing, blushing, turning pale. The body reacts before thought can intervene. Yet Phaedra is not deceived about what is happening to her. She recognizes immediately that the passion is forbidden. Hippolytus is not simply a young man she loves. He is her stepson, the son of her husband Theseus. The desire violates the most basic boundaries of family and social order. Phaedra knows this from the beginning. Her suffering lies precisely in the fact that she knows. This structure, knowledge without power, runs through the entire play. Phaedra repeatedly describes her passion as something alien moving through her. At one point, she invokes Venus, the goddess of love, as if the force of desire were a divine attack. Yet Racine does not stage this as an external intervention the way Euripides does. The gods are present mainly in the language the characters use to explain their condition. What we actually see on stage is something more psychological. A human being who understands her own moral collapse but cannot prevent it. The result is a form of tragedy that feels strangely modern. Racine's characters do not simply suffer from passion. They analyze it, judge it, condemn it, and still remain trapped inside it. This emphasis on the limits of human will reflects the intellectual world in which Racine was educated. As a young man, he studied at the schools of Port Royal, an important center of a theological movement known as Jansenism. Jansenist thinkers placed strong emphasis on the fallen condition of human nature. According to their theology, the human will is profoundly weakened by sin and cannot achieve moral goodness without divine grace. Racine eventually distanced himself from the movement institutionally, but its moral psychology seems to echo throughout his tragedies. In Phèdre, desire appears not merely as temptation, but as something more like a fatal condition. Phaedra sees the good with painful clarity, yet that clarity does not grant her control over her own actions. The drama becomes a demonstration of the terrifying gap between understanding and freedom. The philosopher St. Paul once described this condition in a famous line, "I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do." Racine's characters seem to live permanently inside that sentence. This tension appears across Racine's tragedies. In plays such as Andromaque and Berenice, the emotional structure often takes the form of chains of unreturned love. One character desires another who cannot return that love, who in turn desires someone else. The resulting geometry of desire creates a sense that catastrophe is built into the relationships themselves. In Phèdre, the structure is especially stark. Phaedra loves Hippolytus. Hippolytus secretly loves Euripides, a princess whose lineage makes their relationship politically forbidden. Theseus loves Phaedra. None of these attachments can be fulfilled without violating some moral, familial, or political law. Desire, therefore, becomes inseparable from impossibility. Each character moves within a system where love inevitably collides with prohibition. Racine's extraordinary formal discipline intensifies this psychological tension. His tragedies are written in rhymed alexandrines, 12-syllable lines governed by strict classical rules. The form is famously restrained. Racine's vocabulary is relatively limited, and the language of his plays avoids the expansive metaphorical freedom that characterizes Shakespeare. The effect is not poverty of expression, but concentration. Every line must carry emotional weight. There is something almost paradoxical about this stylistic choice. Racine writes about uncontrollable passion in one of the most controlled poetic forms imaginable. The verse moves with precision and balance even as the characters themselves lose control of their emotional lives. The contrast between form and content creates a sense of pressure, as if the rigid structure of the poetry were barely containing the violence of the feelings expressed within it. When moments of mythological imagery suddenly appear, such as Phaedra describing Venus clinging to her prey, they feel almost like ruptures in the disciplined language of the play. The imagery suggests that desire has invaded the orderly world the characters are trying to maintain. Racine also reshapes the character of Hippolytus in ways that subtly change the moral structure of the story. In Euripides' version of the myth, Hippolytus is often portrayed as rigidly hostile toward women, a young man whose devotion to chastity borders on arrogance. Racine softens this portrayal. His Hippolytus possesses emotional depth and a secret love for Euripides. This change makes him not a proud ascetic, but a sympathetic figure struggling with his own forbidden attachment. The dramatic effect is crucial. By making Hippolytus honorable and humane, Racine increases the sense of injustice that surrounds the tragedy. Phaedra's passion does not merely threaten abstract moral rules, it ultimately destroys the most innocent person in the play. The catastrophe unfolds when Theseus returns unexpectedly and learns of the accusation against his son. Believing that Hippolytus has attempted to violate his wife, Theseus calls upon Neptune to punish him. The curse is granted. Hippolytus dies after a monstrous sea creature terrifies his horses, causing a fatal accident. Only after this irreversible destruction does the truth emerge. Phaedra confesses the falsehood of the accusation and reveals the reality of her passion. Overwhelmed by guilt, she takes poison and dies. Theseus is left to confront the horror of what he has done. He has destroyed his own son because he believed a lie that originated in the turmoil of another person's soul. Order is restored in a formal sense. Theseus promises protection to Euripides, and the political world of the play regains stability. But the emotional devastation cannot be undone. The tragedy closes not with triumph, but with the recognition of irreparable loss. What makes this ending so disturbing is the clarity with which everyone eventually understands what has happened. No one remains deceived. The truth is known. But knowledge arrives only after the destruction it might have prevented. Racine's tragedy therefore exposes a deeply uncomfortable possibility about human nature. We often assume that understanding our motives will give us power over them. If we can name a passion, analyze it, expose its consequences, we imagine that we will become free from its control. Phèdre suggests something much darker. The characters see everything. They know the laws they are breaking, the suffering they are causing, and the catastrophe that awaits them. Yet the knowledge does not save them. Awareness becomes part of the suffering itself. In Racine's world, the most dangerous passions are not the ones that hide in darkness. They are the ones that unfold under the cold light of consciousness, where every step toward disaster is taken with full understanding. And that is what makes Phaedra's fate so unsettling. Her tragedy is not that she mistakes evil for good. Her tragedy is that she recognizes the good perfectly and still cannot follow it. So, let me ask you this. Do you think self-awareness actually gives us control over our desires? Or does it simply make us suffer them more clearly? And what about Phaedra? Is she more guilty because she understands her passion? Or less guilty because she cannot control it?